Welcome to Space Insiders. My name's Tony Sewell.
And this is Rob Ruyak.
And this is our very first podcast, Rob. Numero uno.
Numero uno. Very excited, Tony.
It's
Known you for a
exciting.
long time. We've talked about this for a while. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's give people a voice in what they're doing in space. Super excited.
Awesome. So Rob and I, look, we've been colleagues and friends for quite a few years now. We've been talking about something that we thought was really missing in sort of podcasting in the space industry. And what we really wanted to do was interview a range of really interesting people from the space industry, founders, VCs, marketing experts, all sorts of people from different functions that learn about what makes them tick. Less focus on the technical space mission, or that side's really interesting, but also like we want to help people understand like how accessible the space industry is and opportunities in the space industry for entrepreneurship and startups and whatnot.
Yeah, and have the discussion on how could space apply to solving a whole myriad of problems. It's not just the rockets, it's not just exploring space, all of which is really interesting and important, but how could space now be used for other types of use cases, other problems to solve? And the other fun thing about it is that we're kind of still on this precipice of the commercial space industry providing value in the commercial industry, but also government, where it's historically been a lot of the large defense contractors. So it's a fun time, and we just feel it's a great opportunity to try to have that conversation.
Yeah, and we've got some amazing guests lined up. So we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks. Our first guest today is Laura Crabtree. She's CEO and founder of Epsilon3. They're a SaaS company helping to optimize workflows in space operations. She has a super interesting background. 10 years at SpaceX. I can't wait to talk to get a few insights into that. I mean, we think sort of working at Amazon, we talk about that as being dog years, but I can't imagine what having been at SpaceX between like 2010 and 2020 must have been like in the kind of the heyday of the company. So I'm super excited about that.
Absolutely.
What we're going to do though, before we do that, so one thing we want to do as we sort of kick off each of these shows is have a little bit of a talk about sort of what's been catching our eye in the news. Obviously, we've got Space Symposium coming up next week. But Rob, one of the things I wanted to touch on, which is kind of incredible, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen, just been following what's been going on in the SATCOM space in Europe. Eutelsat shares have gone up 265% in the last month. A lot of it as a result of this new, I guess, the changing geopolitical situation around sovereignty, sovereign SATCOM capabilities. So with this IRIS program in Europe, obviously Eutelsat is going to be really central to that because they were really languishing from a share price perspective. And a number of the key SATCOM players in Europe are up. SES is up 26% in the last month. OHB up 10%. What do you reckon about all this? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, while all that's happening in the U.S., you look at the large defense contractor, big cap stocks, they're all down, right? So I think a lot of it is, a lot of what we're hearing in the news. There's a lot of the geopolitical dynamics that are occurring. I think there's a lot of uncertainty around, what is the kind of the new world look like for defense contractors, a defense industrial base, which frankly includes space, right? Includes a lot of commercial space companies too, because that is where they sell a lot of their capability and solutions. So I think part of it is, just the uncertainty and the unknowns, and the investors just trying to understand where the value is in this uncertainty. I think it's natural to see a lot of these stocks, and it's great to see these European stocks to see such gains. because I think the investment in European space, aerospace, and defense is much needed, and it's something that is really exciting for those in Europe, where they've been building this kind of capability. You mentioned Iris as an example. Like that's a big opportunity for Europe, big opportunity for the defense industrial base in Europe. So I think it's exciting, while at the same time, a lot of this is a reflection of the unknown that I think over time is going to, you know, be a little bit more clear. Now, you talked about the space symposium. One of the things that I'm excited about with the space symposium next week is starting to understand and listen to a lot of the traditional defense contractors speak about how they do want to disrupt the defense market themselves, and how much of that they really mean as it relates to that. So for example, are they partnering? They want to partner more with commercial space companies? Do they want to maybe even spin new companies out of what they do today? Are there potential acquisition opportunities? I think we're at a point in time where um, global governments are going to now have to access more emerging tech, more innovative commercial technology, dual use technology, and trying to figure out how they're starting to do that is something I'm really excited to see next week at the symposium.
Yeah, well, it'd be great to get Laura's perspective on some of this. Like she came from SpaceX, but she also started a career in Northrop Grumman. And I watched an interview with her from a couple of weeks ago where she was kind of talking about how sort of 15 years ago, the only companies in space were these big guys, Raytheon and Boeing and Northrop Grumman, and like the whole environment has really changed. So I think she's a great guest for us to have as we launch this. So what do you reckon we bring her in?
Let's get it started.
Awesome. Hey, Rob. Hey, Laura. Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Laura, it's so great to see you. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago we were talking.
How could I
Do
forget?
you?
Yes.
Yes.
You are one of the people that I really wanted to work with, Rob.
And you're the one that got away, Laura. So really happy that you could join us today. We are super excited to talk to you and learn a little bit about your journey in space, specifically in I think your background at SpaceX and other experiences you've had, and then most importantly, a couple of years ago you started your own company, right?
I did.
It's
Yeah.
Epsilon3. Yeah.
Yep.
So
4 years ago, actually, 4 years and 2 months officially, but more than that unofficially. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will tell you, Tony and I, we attended that Payload Investor Day
Oh yeah.
conference. When was that? Was that
Yep,
October?
last year.
That was last year,
Yeah,
late
late last
year.
year. And I don't know about you guys, but I was very impressed with the way that they ran that whole event. It was really good. It's very intimate. I think those guys do a really good job over at Payload. And one of the things that Tony and I, we were standing next to each other, we were listening to you on that panel. I'm trying to remember the topic. Was it specifically on entrepreneurship? I'm trying to remember.
I think it was an everything topic because we had Will Brewy, we had Alex from Loft on the panel, so the three of us, and there was just a focus on sort of entrepreneurial space startups, etc., on that
Yeah.
panel.
Yeah. And it was great because I think that may have been the first time I actually met you in person, which was great.
It was, yeah.
So Tony and I were talking about, as we think through this podcast and the value of it. I think both of us were, Tony mentioned you, and it was like perfect, I think, to kick this off with because of all your experience. So thanks for joining us. Let's start off with this first question. So try to tell us what really inspired you about starting Epsilon3. What helped you make the jump from where you were before?
Yeah. So I guess going back to 2020, when my life changed now for the better, I left SpaceX after almost 11 years, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. if you've ever talked to somebody that worked at SpaceX, you'll know that it's sort of like a divorce. And not that I've ever been divorced, I don't have that experience, but I've been through a lot of hardships and friendships and relationships, and it feels like something is being ripped out of you a little bit. And
11 years at SpaceX has got to be like dog
yeah,
years too, I would think.
it is. Everybody says that 1 year at SpaceX is like 3 years in the real world. And so let's just say it was almost 33 years at SpaceX. And, I thought about what I wanted to do, and really the big picture of what I wanted to do was continue making an impact in the industry that I loved and still love to this day. And I thought that might be at a bunch of startups. So I interviewed at a bunch of startups, and I interviewed at AWS. I talked to Aerospace Corp. I talked to Northrop Grumman, and the same sort of story kept coming up, which was around software. And you guys know this, but I'm not a software engineer. I disliked very much my software classes at USC when I attended there. But through the 17 years I spent in the industry, I developed a love for software that I didn't know I could have. And I thought to myself, hey, all these people have problems in software, and I love software. And through my experiences at SpaceX, I had developed some internal software and also learned to test and write code in a way that I didn't learn in college. And I thought, hey, I could probably solve this problem because I have the unique experience of getting hardware from build to flight operations. And I have also experience in building software. So why don't I share that with the world? But it did take me almost 6 months to build the confidence I needed to actually think I could start something that could be successful. And around the time when I was toying with what do I do? Do I actually jump in headfirst into the deep end of this company? That's when I met you, Rob, and was still struggling a little bit with that, but had the idea and was starting to write a business plan. And then in that process also met my co-founder, Max. And Max and I thought this could be really a good thing for the industry. And we had started talking to potential customers, and then we just decided to dive in. And that was why we started.
I was just listening to the panel you did, Monty 2025, a couple of weeks ago, and it was super interesting how you sort of the backdrop of like when you started at Northrop Grumman back in the 2000s, and at that stage there was like 5 companies in space, and it was just like the cusp of new space, and then sort of SpaceX was sort of the leader in sort of commercializing space. And you comment about how everyone was building their own software. No one was addressing the software problem or the infrastructure problem. And it kind of made me think about another friend of ours in the industry. I don't know if you know Alvaro from Lean Space. He's been pretty vocal on social lately, sort of lamenting the fact that so many space companies are still, they want all their software on-prem. They still want to do everything on-prem, and they're not sort of embracing SaaS. Like space is a really like a very hardware-centric sort of industry. Like, how have you found customers of different, because you're working with customers of different sizes, how are you seeing they're embracing these ideas?
It depends on how long they've been around, really. Anybody who entered the industry in the last 10 years does not want to manage on-prem services. They do not want a containerized software that they have to redeploy. For us, it would be, if you wanted to keep up with the progress, you'd have to redeploy every week, which is untenable. So most of the people that are on-prem with us will deploy once a month, once every 3 months. But the problem that they now have is that their employees that are using Epsilon3 are wanting all the changes that we're outputting, and they are not able to keep up with redeploying. So we warn them, but this is still a problem. But they still are a little bit worried about security of the cloud, security of ITAR information, and then all of the security reviews that they have to go through. So newer customers being like, I've been in operations less than 10 years or so around, generally just want to embrace the cloud and don't want a whole person to have to manage something like this. But, incumbents or longer standing customers in some ways, not all, don't want to embrace it and yet still talk about it, but then sometimes go to on-prem also. So it's a mixed bag. And we built the platform for cloud, knowing that at some point we would have to deploy on-prem. And so we built it for the cloud with the expectation that on-prem would come. And it did a couple of years later, but we still try to steer people towards the cloud because it's just so much faster and so much easier to get access and so much easier to onboard people. And I think one of the main things that we want to do is allow people to move faster with smaller teams. And you can't do that if you have an on-prem deployment all the time. So it goes both ways, I suppose. But I think security is
Laura,
Sorry.
do you see any difference in how people discuss and adopt different technologies, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud or whatever that end architecture might be, based on whether or not they're a government customer versus commercial? Are you seeing any kind of, are you still seeing that be very different? And kind of where in particular, if there's a particular area?
I think let's see, I'm thinking about our on-prem customers. It's in the higher security spaces. So if you're working with the government in a more high security way, more compartmentalized way, you're probably going to only be able to do on-prem, and that's okay. But I think in the end, all roads sort of lead back to the government. So even if you have a commercial company, they probably have a government contract of some sort. So I think most roads in this industry lead to ITAR, which is government controlled. So
Right.
I think most people should probably just embrace the cloud at this point in time, but not all will.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Tony and I would, we're going to continue to explore, with this podcast here, and see not only, where people actually all align on that end goal, but what is the journey to actually get there? What are the roadblocks to get there? Because the other thing that's, I think, quite interesting is there's the legacy thinking around on-prem and being, very focused on being comfortable with that. Maybe it is ITAR, maybe it's other things, but the other aspect is, hoping that there's going to be another forcing function, and potentially with a new administration, maybe there is some of that where the large legacy defense contractors need to figure out how to be more efficient, effective, and mostly cost effective, especially as we start to see a lot less of this cost plus type contracting exist, right? And the awards change a bit more towards incentive based. So I mean, I personally see that as a great opportunity for companies such as yourself. Do you agree? And if so,
absolutely.
What do you think the path is there? Yeah.
For us, efficiency and time savings is the biggest reason either to use the cloud or to use a commercially available SaaS product. And you can't find in my opinion, obviously I'm super biased, but you can't find a better team that responds to their customers than the team that we've built here, because we genuinely just love this industry and want it to be able to move as fast as we know it can. And then going back to the cost plus, that was the big shift for me from Northrop Grumman to SpaceX. Northrop Grumman sort of had large, I won't say blank check, but they had large contracts where if they overrun, it's okay. You just
go back
go to the
to
government
the
and
well.
say, we overran our contract. You need to pay us more. We're going to deliver, let's go with JWST, because that's the one that I can talk about the most, which, when I started at Northrop in 2004, they were building it and going to launch it a couple of years later. And we all know that that didn't happen. But, you know, when I went to SpaceX, it was, okay, we have to build. My first 2 months there, we built cargo racks, and I was, you know, welding and riveting. And I am not a welder or riveter, but there was, you know, an all hands on deck. We have to get this done because we have a milestone that is a payment milestone. We have to do this so that we all get paid. And you have to meet that deadline. So we were in on Friday, Saturday, Sunday until all hours of the day and night to get it done so that you get paid. And I never felt that fire at like legacy companies where you have to get it done, because if you don't get it done on time, nobody gets paid. I mean, we were still going to get a paycheck, but the company wasn't going to get paid.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, Epsilon3 has been a bit over 4 years now. You've been through Series A.
Yeah.
What's been what has been harder to do than you expected? Like, what were the things that like kind of surprised you about the journey you've been on?
So I'm an engineer. So building the product, knowing what the product should do, listening to the customers is literally my favorite thing to do. The hardest thing to do was to learn how to build a business. You know, I think for me, it was, I'm going to go to Google. And somebody said to me, actually, Rob, someone we know, Mike Moreno, he said, oh, you have to build a pitch deck. And I said, so a what? He said, oh, you have to build a pitch deck. And he said, you have to look up Y Combinator. And I'm thinking, this is all gibberish. Somebody's telling me random letters. And he's like, just find the YC pitch deck and build a pitch deck off of that. And so I just Googled YC pitch deck, and I thought, oh, I could do that. And I had already built, you know, an Excel spreadsheet with like who our customers would be, why they would want to use our platform. So I already had an idea of our customer profile, why they would even use it, what problems we were solving. So I already had all that information. I just had to put it in the form of a pitch deck. And then learning, you know, all of the acronyms, which I won't tell the story here, but there's a funny story with Elon and acronyms. If you Google it, you'll find it.
Right.
It was part of my journey at SpaceX, which I tried to encourage people to not use acronyms following what happened. But
I've got to look this up.
There's like a whole Reddit.
Look it up now, Tony.
There's a subreddit thread somewhere on the internet about the acronyms email, but there were a ton of acronyms. There's finance acronyms forever and a day. And so even now when I talk to investors, I still sometimes Google, and maybe this is a bad secret, but I still sometimes have to Google, what does that acronym mean?
Yeah. My favorite are the nested acronyms. An acronym within an acronym. It was something when I was in my early army days. One of my first commanding officers, he took great delight in, like, he would, and it taught me to do it. Like when people were using acronyms in briefings, he would tell me what that means. And so many times people just didn't know what the acronyms meant.
There was a really great embedded acronym that we had at SpaceX for a communication box, and it was a bunch of NASA acronyms embedded into the SpaceX acronym. So it was called CUCU, CUCU, and it was the COTS UHF Communications Unit. And COTS is a NASA coined kind of term, and then UHF is just a mode of communication. And it was just the band that we were using, and then, you know, multi-embedded acronym. It was great. Wow.
So we just went down a totally nerd acronym spiral. How do we bring it up to?
I told you I would end up with nerd stuff.
It's common. It's a rite of passage.
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and the book is right on my shelf, right next to me, Laura, is I remember you and I had a follow-on conversation to stay in touch, and I was asking you a similar question that Tony just asked around, you know, what are some of the things that you're, you know, really trying to learn quickly? And one of them was the Challenger sale. Do you remember that book? Yeah.
I've got it. I've got
It's
that
right
over
behind
there.
me
Yeah, I've got it
on
over there too.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. This is not a paid ad for the challenge sale. But yeah, I went and bought that. I read about it. It was really useful. But there's something about I agree. There's something about, if you're learning to get into sales at a big company, if you're learning how to, just sell whatever it is that you have this great idea around as a startup, it's not that easy.
No.
And I think the biggest challenge, and I think in this industry, what's really makes this industry fun, the aerospace space industry, is that I think the best way to sell is make it solution focused
Yeah.
with business outcomes. And that's like one piece. The other piece is that it's okay to challenge your customer on how they're thinking about solving the problem, which a lot of that is that book, right? It's, you don't need to just be an order taker. It's actually better not to be. It's better
Right.
to understand the business of the customer and try to figure out how you fit for their business
Yeah.
outcomes.
True.
So, with that being said, where have you seen that truly benefit you to date with Epsilon 3? And maybe it's a use case, maybe it's a particular customer profile, but where have you seen that hook?
Let's see. So for us, it's really about solving the team problem. It's as your team gets bigger, how do you communicate best practices? How do you record data? And everybody has a solution in place, whether it's a Word doc that you email back and forth to a Confluence page to some in-house built tool. But the question really is, how much time are you spending on maintaining those things? How much time are you spending on configuration management or communication and collaboration that you wouldn't have to spend if you were using Epsilon 3? And how much does that cost you
Hmm.
in time, in people, in brain power, in late nights, etc.? And I think that's where we have to ask the question of our customer, because they'll say, "Oh, we're all set." Like, "Oh, we have an ERP system." And I said, "Well, we're not really an ERP system. We'll work with your ERP system, but we're not an ERP." "Oh, we already have, name some software acronym, and we're not
Yeah.
really that either.
Yeah.
But we can work with those systems." And that is where I found a lot more success, is really more in learning about what the customer wants to be able to do and how they see solving that problem, and then figuring out if we're the right solution for them, because it might not be right for everybody. And it's just about asking the question and knowing what the customer is doing. So it's about learning their process and learning how they want to see their company work. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a bit about how you approach the demand generation process. So we got Space Symposium coming up next week. I think you might be I think I saw you might be speaking or on a panel or something. Um, um, it's amazing how that conference has really sort of become so prominent over the last few years. I come from the SATCOM industry, and it's been interesting seeing how the SATCOM events have really kind of gone downhill, and Space Symposium has become a much bigger focus. I think, obviously, with the change of or the opportunity in commercial space, but it's a really expensive. It's expensive, big investment to get for a small company to go to an event like that. Like, how do you think about conferences like that, and how and the whole sort of new customer engagement and acquisition process?
I look at it as a way to meet people and talk to them about what they're doing. I don't necessarily look at it as I'm going to go and tell you
Get X
everything
dollars
about.
in pipeline.
Yeah, I don't think about it like that. I think about it as, this these people are my tribe, if you will. I don't know how else to describe it, but this is the industry that I live and work in. These are the people that I like. I want to learn about what's going on in the industry, and I want to figure out, if we're doing the right things. And I use something like Space Symposium to to keep learning about the industry, learn about new things that are being developed, learn about, what my friends have been doing, because there's I never went to a conference when I was at Northrop or when I was at SpaceX. So the first time I went to a conference, um, I actually went to Ascend, was my first conference, which is a AIAA conference in Vegas. And that was my first ever conference. And then my second conference was Space Symposium, and the huge contrast between the two, it cannot be bigger difference. One is, a small couple hundred person group, and the other is like 12,000 people. So I see symposium as just a way to learn about what's going on, because there are so many people, and you can't. It's also very exhausting.
Is there anything in particular you're looking out for? Were you interested to see what comes out of next week? Obviously, I think there's a bit of concern about how many government customers are going to be there for a
Yeah,
start. I
everybody's
think,
talking about that.
yeah,
Whether the government is actually going to travel. I think they will limit.
Mm.
I haven't had a lot of government meetings at Space Symposium ever. And so I probably won't be meeting with anyone from the government. But next week, I'm really focusing on the new startups and all of the people that are building new things that I haven't spoken with yet, and really excited to, expand my horizons and learn about new people and new businesses that are up and coming. And I also look at it as a way to help, because there are a lot of people that I know that don't know each other. So I do a lot of introductions at things like this as well.
Yeah, I will say, of all the industries I've worked in my career, and I've worked in a bunch of different ones, this to me seems to be the most collegial, collaborative, friendly industry that I've ever witnessed, actually. And I don't know if it's because the problems that we're trying to solve are so large, or the visions that people have are so big, also,
Yeah.
that it kind of creates more of that natural behavior to be more collaborative. I'm not really sure, but that's something that I'm always been very attracted to. And I think the Space Symposium is really unique that way, because I almost feel like it is a taking a breather moment where people in industry can come together and meet at the bar and have a conversation and catch up. And maybe they talk about their career, or maybe they talk about what their companies are doing, or maybe they talk about business ideas or opportunities, but it kind of spans the whole spectrum, of conversation. And
Yeah.
that's why I always enjoy it, because it's a way to really connect with a lot of people that I've met over the years that I like to work with. I'm inspired by. So I have always thought it's a great show to attend,
Yeah.
and participate in. And I think, to your point, Tony, it isn't as much of a what's the pipeline type of conference, right? There's plenty of those,
Yep. Need to tell our
So
marketing.
so I'll have to
people
look
that.
for you, Laura, when we're out there next week.
I'll be there.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. So, Laura, this has been awesome. One last question. This is sort of outside of work. So, if you could instantly master a skill outside of your working professional life, what would it be and why?
Oh, that is a great question. I might use this for an interview question. I always ask an in an interview some question about the person, something that they do, something that they love. Um, I think it might be around language, being able to speak another language. I grew up speaking Spanish, but I have let that slip, and I live in a household where I live with French speakers, and my kids are learning Mandarin, and I feel woefully left behind.
French
And
is a great one for the space industry.
I think language would be a good one.
Yeah.
I have worked with a number of Japanese customers, French customers, Spanish customers, and German customers, and I think it would be great to be able to easily converse with all of them. And outside of work, I love to travel, and I fostered a love for travel when I was working at Northrop and I lived in England. and I traveled to, I don't know how many countries. I should have probably written that down, but a lot more. I actually got my first actual stamp in my passport moving to England. And so when I was there, my passport was full and I had to get more pages, which is, really cool.
It's kind of sad that they don't stamp passports anymore.
Yeah, you have to ask. You can ask.
They do.
Yeah,
I get stamps. Not if you're a European.
Yeah, or like when I go to Australia, they don't stamp them, or yeah. But
Well, yeah, they say welcome home.
Yeah, they do.
But for me, it was kind of a nice way to learn about the world, and I always tried to learn a few phrases, a few sentences, and it depends what country you're in. But some countries, people really love that you try, and some countries they say, "Oh my gosh, you speak English! I want to practice my English with you."
Yeah.
But I think that would be a really cool skill to
I
master.
love it. That's a great one.
Yeah, me too.
What about you guys? You have a good thing you want to master?
Well, I've always tried to master this, playing the guitar.
It's a good one.
I'm playing I'm playing the bass. So Rob and I are going to start a band.
I'm going to start a band. I've got a piano player for you. My 10-year-old's really good. So, and the 8-year-old will sing for you.
All right.
Oh,
Sounds
nice.
good.
So it looks like we got a band figured out.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, Laura, thanks so much for joining us. This was great. Our first podcast in the books, helping to blaze a trail with us. Where can, if people want to learn more about Epsilon3, where can people find you and the company?
So we have Twitter. It's just Epsilon3 Inc. on Twitter. And you can find me. I'm LL Crabby, Crabbie on Twitter. We also have LinkedIn, and we have a website, which is just epsilon3.io. And you can chat with us there. You can find out more about the product, or just ask us whatever questions you have.
Awesome.
We're always open to feedback, ideas, whatever you want to tell us. We want to learn.
Great. I'll post those in the show notes. And thanks everyone for joining us too for our first podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, we'd love to see you write a review or rate us. We are also, you can reach out to us at info@spaceinsiders.show. And we'll also have a LinkedIn page, Space Insider Show, and a YouTube channel. So really keen as we sort of get rolling on this. If you've got questions or the topics you want to talk to us about, please reach out to us. But this is good, Rob. Thanks, Laura.
This was fun. This was a blast. Laura, you're the best. Thank you so much for doing this with us. This was great.
All right.
We'll see you soon. Best of luck.
And we'll see you on the next episode, which will be in 2 weeks' time. So thanks for joining us.